This is big. And you've been highlighting this subtly since the beginning of our conversation, is this money mindset being such a powerful element, whether it's for yourself when you're going out online and you're starting to sell for yourself. You're now talking about it when it comes to the team members. And I'd love to see, like, what are these things in the money mindset that we should be looking for in ourselves that we should also be paying attention to in the people we bring in our team?
So I think, first of all, I think that we can't listen to someone else's money mindset if we are still noisy on our own. So let's start with that. I've not heard anyone else use it. I have a system I call the money ruler. I try to never talk about a person's relationship with money using actual financial numbers as the increment of conversation. So in other words, I wouldn't have a conversation about whether you're grossing 100,000, a million, 250,000. I mean, I would have that conversation. I would get that number. But what I want to do is I want to understand your personal risk point when it comes to money. Where does the concept of money start to get noisy for you? Because different, $100,000, $10,000, $5,000, $100,000. Like we sold a business last year for $10 million. So we were negotiating a company that was acquired for $10 million. These are all just numbers. And it's really easy to assume that someone's emotional response to a fixed number is rational because it is a number. But I could have an emotional response to $10,000 that might not trigger for you for $150,000 or for $1 million. And so what I'm looking for is, what is the ruler I can use? Like, what is a large sum of money? And a lot of times, so we talked about CreativeLive. When I was recruiting instructors for CreativeLive, I was looking for, what is a large financial event in this person's life? Is it a $20,000 weekend workshop? Is it a $100,000 book deal? Is it $1 million acquisition? I try to have them tell me what the increment is. And then I try to have conversations from this point forward using that increment as my value point. So if someone has said that a $20,000 weekend workshop is like kind of this unit that they're really familiar with, I will not talk about how much something might cost. I might not use the phrase $100,000. I might say it's roughly about 5 of your weekend workshops. And what I'm looking for is this number that is meaningful to them, not to me, but to them. And then I want to try to use that as the analogy for conversations around money. Because otherwise, my own judgments around what a lot of money is and what a little bit of money is gets in the way of me understanding their mindset. Because I might have an emotional reaction at a number, and it may feel like an incredibly rational emotional reaction that feels so justified by math that there is no way, that's a universal response to that number. Only to find out that person has a completely different relationship with money, and I could not access it because my relationship with money was getting in the way.
Yeah, it's like when you're negotiating a deal and you're not speaking the same money language, you're going to have the short end of the stick, because you're basically, you're going to out negotiate yourself if you have your own insecurities about money, and you might cut yourself short. And I think for so many people who might be self-employed, and I want to speak maybe to smaller enterprises that might be listening to this podcast, where you are discounting yourself heavily because the resistance to the price, and this is a quote I love to bring up, is the resistance of the price is always in the mind of the seller, not the buyer. And it's our own money beliefs that will make us discount ourselves because we feel our self-worth isn't justified the price that we charge, when really we have to understand the value of the person. And the only way that you get to have that is when you understand their money mindset and you've healed the one that you have.
Healed the one you have. That's such a good way of saying it, because here's the thing. When it comes to self-worth and money, there's this ebb and flow. I cannot get me to a place where I can put a value on my time, my money, my value until I do my work on me. But at the point I enter a conversation with you, I got to be done with me, because you're the only one that matters in this conversation. And if I am trying to fight for my self-value and fund my sense of self-value in a conversation with you around price or value or anything else, I'm no longer listening to you. I am only reacting in the moment to what I'm emotionally responding to. I have the advantage. I was taken under the arm by a a sales trainer or a head of sales in one of the companies I was supporting years ago, and he got me into some sales training. And they had this great exercise that I still kind of use today, although it's kind of fallen apart. My threshold's gotten a little bit worse. But basically, we'd have this process of us basically trying to hit how much money was involved in a transaction where we started to get scared or started to pull away, or like where we as buyers started to make decisions that we don't, or approach to that sales process that we don't want to encourage or accept in the people buying from us. And so I think for me, it was probably about $3,500. I was in my 20s, $3,500. Like I could sell anything $1,200, $2,000. Like I was doing all these things that were in that unit. Once it kind of got above $3,500, I kind of got a little bit freaked out and was looking for reasons why they were unhappy or why they were not going to take it. And that was, I mean, I was probably making $60,000, $70,000 a year at that point. So I was not, I mean, that was not an insubstantial amount of money. And the exercise that my coach had me do is take out $3,500 in cash and carry it on my person until I stopped being uncomfortable with it.
Oh, wow.
So it meant that I was walking around with so much money that it felt like something that I was really going to lose. It meant I went to the gym and like it would be in my wallet and I would be like realizing, okay, someone could break in and like steal this. Basically, it meant that I took the number that I was uncomfortable with and that became my pocket change. That became the money I carried around until I had gotten around the financial panic that I was feeling around that number. And I'm still doing that today. Like I'm constantly looking for a way to try to find where my brain starts to panic at a financial number and to try to figure out how I can engage around that number in such a way that my brain starts to lose some of the financial senses of panic. And part of that is because of this technique I use where I don't talk about number, or I talk about numbers with people. First of all, I do a lot of talking with people. If we were not recording this and if we were having any type of business conversation, I would be asking about your gross sales, like all sorts of numbers, and whether you want to talk to me about them or not, they are a place I'm really comfortable going, and I end up going there with most conversations. And because I use this idea of this money ruler where I'm trying to not add a value judgment on those numbers as much as I'm just trying to find where people's emotional pivot point is around numbers and use that as the unit to then talk about. That becomes the increment. I've been able to have conversations around finances and money and emotion with people that are experiencing the emotion so much farther up that chain than me. Like where they're feeling around emotion, they may have 2 more zeros on their numbers compared to me. Like the amount of like their tipping point from when the money noise starts to like cloud their head and they're like getting distracted might be 2 additional zeros to the numbers that cause that with me. But because I am using a unit of number for them, so like I might be talking about, the number of $100,000 vacations are represented by this, or like whatever that increment is, it keeps me from engaging my emotion around that. And it also teaches me a little bit that there is not a fixed emotional response to a fixed emotional number or to a fixed number. Like these are all just stories that we are putting on top of those numbers. But because socially, it feels like math, it feels like science. It doesn't feel like an emotional story. It feels like justified fact.
You sent me again on a mind adventure, thinking about some of the deals I'm negotiating now and where my threshold happens. And me, it was a $500,000 deal that was coming across my desk. And I realized how much anxiety, how much doubt, how much is like, oh, am I worth it? If this is 2 months work, is this, and I start having those kinds of doubts. And now the idea of self-worth and money mindset, I realize I've went into that space of my own mind. And I think this idea of being able to be surrounded with people that have so much more zeros behind them gets you to be more comfortable with the bigger numbers as you move forward.